This is 51 Stories, and this week I'm writing science fiction, the hard kind. It takes place in an underwater colony sometime in the future where a scientist makes a life-changing and perhaps life-threatening discovery. Welcome to 51 Stories, the channel where my name is Johan, share an original short story once a week, almost every week of the year. Every Monday, I'm given a random assignment from my AI editor, and every Friday is my deadline. This week, I'm supposed to write hard science fiction, and hard science fiction leans heavily into actual science, which required a lot of Googling. It's supposed to be on the theme of discovery, set, as I said, in an underwater colony. It's also written from a weird narrative perspective, or perhaps not that uncommon narrative perspective, called third-person omniscient, which means that I have total access to everything that's going on as a narrator. And it's pretty good for building tension. So I hope that I will set the tone as tasked, which is supposed to be very tense and claustrophobic. I also get a story spark, which is one word to get me going, and this week's word is key. So, if you're ready, here's this week's short story titled Marduk. Duncan Devi pressed his hand against the inside of the hull. It had developed into a nervous tic over the last few weeks. Wherever he went inside the colony, he felt compelled to check the structural integrity of the metal plating and tempered glass. He'd been living on Marduk for 7 years now, but it was only a couple of months ago that he'd finally read up on the name. It was Sumerian. Marduk fought Tiamat, the primordial sea, killing her and splitting her up to create the heavens and the earth. What Duncan didn't like about the name was that if it cast their underwater colony as Marduk, then the ocean was Tiamat. That meant the remnants of humanity and the sea were at war. This was all superstitions of an ancient culture, of course. At least that's what he kept telling himself. He much preferred the water as just hydrogen oxide and not an ancient deity hell-bent on drowning them all, especially after the captain had temporarily suspended upkeep to reroute all power to the heating systems. "Would you stop that?" Leonora Kim Xiang glared up at him from behind her workstation. The lab was white and sterile, bathed in bright light from the 5,000 Kelvin LEDs, making her features appear flat and pale. "What?" Duncan said, removing his hand from the cold wall. "You're the chief engineer. How do you think we all feel when you keep checking for leaks?" Duncan didn't say anything, just let out a sigh, visible in the cold. "I don't mean to be harsh," Leonora said, returning to her microscope, "but you've designed one of the most sophisticated sensory systems ever created. We'll know if anything's wrong." She peered down the optics, trying to make sense of what she was looking at. "Is it still changing?" "Yes," she mumbled. She'd put the sample through the ringer. Only nitrogen seemed to slow it down. "I'm not a biologist, but shouldn't that tissue be dead by now?" Duncan said. "Not unless it's not tissue." "What do you mean?" Leonora looked up, rubbing her strained eyes. "Ever heard of a Portuguese man-o'-war?" "The jellyfish?" Physalia physalis. It's a siphonophore, a colonial organism. It's made up of several genetically identical zooids that are morphologically different. So, a bunch of animals forming a bigger animal, like Voltron. "What's a Voltron?" "Doesn't matter. What does that have to do with the tissue?" Leonora removed the sample tray, carrying it back to the storage cabinet. It looks like it's not made up of cells like you would expect, but independent organisms. Duncan bunched up his eyebrows, processing the information. Isn't that what cells are? Not exactly. Cells depend on the larger structure of the body and signal substances for the distribution of oxygen, nutrients, and so on. These cells extract oxygen from the water independently. Huh. I also added a glucose isotope to the solution to track metabolic pathways. I'll have to run proper tests, but at first glance, it looks like an uneven distribution without any interacting signals. Meaning? It's a bunch of animals eating their fill without relying on the others. Duncan stared at her. So that thing out there in the tank, that's not an animal. Leonora gave him a tired smile. I think it's a bunch of small animals faking at being a large animal, like a school of fish. It had been 3 days since they caught the organism on one of the hull cameras, hanging on to the plating by its tentacles. They had assumed it was an undiscovered species of octopi. Then it changed its morphology. If I can prove it's an entirely new type of organism, they can't shut my program down. Leonora smiled triumphantly, securing the tray in the cabinet. Then something stung her hand. Meanwhile, further down the corridor, Kilmer Reeves stepped into the marine research bay. The lights ramped up smoothly, revealing the creature floating in the tank. Usually, the tank was filled with a myriad of species caught for cataloging and research. This thing, though, had eaten all of them the first night, including the scaly-foot gastropods Kilmer had kept in there while trying to build a replica of their hydrothermal vent habitat. It had changed shape again. "Dim the lights," Kilmer said. The research bay returned to the soft ambient lighting of the night cycle. "Log for Reeves." A soft ding signaled that the system was recording. "The specimen has morphed a third time. Resembles a jellyfish. Umbrella-shaped bell, trailing tentacles," he said, then paused before adding, "and bioluminescence." He stepped closer, transfixed by the soft bluish glow refracting through the tempered glass. "The specimen is showcasing a controlled photon release, likely a standard luciferin-luciferase reaction." The light suddenly pulsed along the creature's side. Kilmer stared at it. "Hello?" he whispered on a whim. Another pulse. No way. With a swallow, Kilmer glanced up at one of the cameras in the ceiling. "Confirm recording." "Active," a synthetic voice confirmed. He wiped his hands on his padded overalls, took a step closer. "Testing 1, 2, 3, he said, not sure what else to say. The glow remained constant. Feeling a bit silly, he looked around, then said, "Hi, I'm Kilmer." There was another pulse, followed by a quick succession of blinks. Kilmer's wide eyes observed the creature in the tank. His mind was racing, his mouth was dry, and his hands were sweating profusely. "Please tell me you got that," he whispered. "Recording in process," the system confirmed. The tentacles under the creature's glowing bell oscillated slightly. Are you... Can you hear me?" One blink. Kilmer froze. It was late. He was on his 4th alertness stack. Somehow, The combination of caffeine, taurine, theanine, and phytochemicals must have put him in some kind of suggestive state. He needed to confirm this wasn't just random timing. If it could be replicated with someone else, anyone, then maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. He was headed for the door when the lab lit up with the blue glow. He turned around, staring back at the tank. He couldn't move. On the bridge of the Marduk, Second Captain Amir Khan was prepping the day shift when he got an alert on his personal heads-up display. It was an energy usage spike. "Goddamn lab rats," he muttered, poking the touchscreen. The Marduk had been in energy conservation mode since they entered the cold stream. That meant shutting down all non-essentials to keep the colony above freezing temperature, but Dr. Xiang and her eggheads kept sneaking into the research facilities. "You'd think they'd be smart enough to realize that they're stealing warmth from literal babies," Amir Khan said, bringing the camera feed up for everyone to see. Oluwasei, his master-at-arms, turned in his chair. "You want me to send someone down there?" Amir Khan considered it, tapping his screen. The research facility was idling at almost 4% of the station's total energy consumption. It doubled every time one of those jerks set foot in there. "You know what? I'm calling it. This is the third time in 48 hours these assholes have defied the rationing orders. Throw them in the brig for a day or two." "The brig, sir? At least they're doing it at night." Amir Khan sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're right. We don't need more tension. Have them constrained to their quarters until further notice." "I'll go down there myself, sir," Oluwasei said. As the master-at-arms climbed the ladder down the elevator shaft, the Marduk's system logged another energy spike from the research facilities. The specimen tank in the research bay signaled a power surge and then went offline. Second Captain Amir Khan swiped the alert off his screen and brought up his comm channel. "Oluwasei," he said into the microphone, "tell me when they're out of there so I can shut it down." "Roger," Oluwasei responded. He headed down the long walkway above the greenery. The plants were covered under thick plastic to keep them from freezing. The Marduk had navigated cold streams before, but this was day 7 of sub-zero temperatures. They'd lost satellite feeds 9 months ago. The navigators made do without them, but they couldn't seem to find warmer waters again. Oluwasei wasn't the only one thinking that perhaps there weren't any warm streams left. He scanned his biometrics and entered the research area. In his head, he practiced what to say to Leonora. With her in the brig, they couldn't keep each other warm at night. He wasn't sure that would convince her, but it was worth a try. As he passed the research bay, the soles of his shoes made a sound that stopped him in his tracks. Breaking out in a cold sweat, he stared down at the water on the floor. "Mary, Mother of God," he whispered, opening his comm. "Oluwasei to the bridge. Captain Amir Khan, I have water. Corridor RA3. Down the hall, inside the lab, Duncan was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He cradled Leonora in his arms as her hand seemed to melt before them. "What is happening?" he cried. "Tell me what to do." I don't," Leonora stammered, watching the cellular structure of her hand rapidly collapse into a gray goo. It looked like necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating bacteria. But instead of killing the tissue, it was actually consuming it. "Amputate!" she cried, her fingers turning to stumps like melting candles. What? Duncan said. "Chop it off!" Stumbling to his feet, Duncan spun around looking for something sharp. "No, wait! Get the canister on my desk!" Duncan dashed over to grab the steel container, then hurried back. "Get it open!" Leonora hissed, holding her hand away from herself in a vain attempt to escape the organism eating its way towards her wrist. Duncan unlocked the clasps and twisted the cap off. Before he could set it down, Leonora plunged her hand into the liquid nitrogen. Outside, in the corridor, Oluwaseyi shot up from inspecting the puddle when a piercing shriek tore through the research facility. "Leonora!" he yelled out, sprinting towards the lab. When he burst through the door, Leonora was on the floor, crying, holding her deformed, frostbitten hand in front of her. "What the hell is going on?" the Master-at-Arms demanded, drawing his sidearm to point at Duncan. "I can explain," Duncan said. "Wait, don't come closer," Leonora shouted at him. "Engage contamination A loud moan cut her off. Oluwaseyi spun around, aiming his gun at the twisted shape in the doorway. All three stared at Kilmer as he staggered into the room. In the bright light, a glistening, gelatinous bulb pulsed like a festering boil on his shoulder. Thick, cord-like tentacles wrapped around his torso. "What the hell is that?" Captain Amerkan hissed at the screen, bringing the security feed from the lab up on the central console. Everyone on the bridge watched, speechless. Amerkan activated the intercom. "This is Second Captain Amerkan," he said over the speakers. "What's going on down there?" On the screen, Dr. Xiang looked up at the camera, waving a wounded hand. "Seal us off!" she screamed. "Lock everything down!" Dr. Kilmer lunged forward. Oluwaseyi opened fire. The shot seemed to bounce off Kilmer's torso. It had rapidly covered in scales. Then Kilmer rushed out of the room. "Where's he going? Track him!" Amerkan ordered the system, watching the feed switch to the corridor cams. "Should I activate the lockdown, sir?" Amerkan tore his eyes from the screen to the operator. "Yes! Don't let anyone out of there until we know what's going on!" There was an alert from the systems log. Amerkan poked his HUD. The log filled the screen. SecLock. RA main. Activate. Biometric key read in progress. The bridge personnel watched in silence, slowly realizing what was happening. "Abort! Lock it down!" Amerkan shouted. The cursor in the log feed blinked, then quickly wrote out the system activity. Identity confirmed. Dr. Reeves Kilmer. Access granted. In the lab, Duncan Devi slumped down on the floor. It was real. He'd seen it. The ocean had sent one of its monsters. The war between Marduk and Tiamat had begun. Okay, that was my take on hard science fiction. Obviously, it's very The Thing, and I didn't plan this out as per usual. Maybe I should. Maybe that should be part of the challenge, that I actually push myself to sort of change my way of writing. I like to dive into things. Sometimes I write an outline and all of that, and I think about it. But usually I just sit down and I write the first draft, and then I outline after that. So I go back, draft. In the second draft, I restructure and I implement new ideas, or I enhance some of the cool stuff, and I get rid of the stuff I don't like, and so on. But with this one, it was pretty. I just wanted to get that tempo of a science fiction horror type story where everyone, the hopping between characters build tension in a way that is very effective. But again, this sort of reads like a prologue to a larger story. If it was a prologue, I guess maybe there would be like another colony somewhere, or another set of survivors somewhere, and they come upon the Marduk, sort of like an alien. The classic Alien movie where they come upon the SOS signal from the planet, and something like that. That's how it feels. It's not exactly a self-contained short story, and I'm working hard at getting to the point where things stop reading like a prologue and start reading like a self-contained, powerful short story. And I think that by the end of this challenge, by the end of 51 stories, I should be able to at least get there a couple of times. In the meantime, I'm just writing stories that I hope you enjoy listening to. And I thought this one was pretty pretty standard fare for science fiction / horror. It's funny about the horror elements. I never intend for them to go in there. I just wanted to write, but everything, like there was something in the assignment from the AI editor where it said that they make a discovery that has serious consequences, and my mind immediately just goes to, oh well, they obviously stumble on some kind of organism that will eat their entire colony. It can't be like, I don't know, they stumble upon something that just lets them breathe underwater or whatever, and it changes in a positive manner. No, it's always like a super serious threat to existence. But I guess, that's evolutionary negativity bias and all that. That's just the way some of us are, I guess. I thought it was a fun story, and I hope you did too. And if you liked it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you didn't like it, subscribe, and perhaps the next story will be more to your liking. You can also follow 51 Stories on Instagram by going to 51 Stories Told at Instagram. If you want to read these stories in your own voice, you can find them for free at Substack, 51stories.substack.com. Okay, that's it. Have a good one, and all hail the mighty, the eternal Storyboros.